The story so far is not going great. Kind of went off the rails a little bit. First of all, the biggest problem, the French decided to cross the Channel, and now they're hemmed in with the Grande Armée, all of it, over in Britain. Absolutely wasn't necessary. They've also lost Italy, or the Kingdom of Italy. It is smaller than I expected, and I ended up falling back from Lombardy. Saving some troops. I probably would have lost it anyway, but I didn't put up as much of a fight with Messina as I should have, and so Charles is successful in Italy. Johann John has captured Baden. A little bit of tweaking around and cheating maybe with the rules on that. But overall, things are just running poorly for them. Spain might be able to get Portugal. Looks hard to prevent them from doing so, unless the English can commit troops, and obviously they've got other things to worry about right now. Prussia can come into the war now. They got to think real hard. We got to make a lot of decisions based on, automatic victory conditions and stuff like that. This game may be over fast, but maybe not, because automatic victory conditions are hard to get to. Close to midnight on Monday. Whatever. And came up here. The heat is mostly broken by now for tonight. But ended up noting, first of all, there were like 4 more cards got shuffled into that deck. Honestly, the deck of cards is just too big to operate with the mechanisms that it appears to operate with. We'll deal those out in a moment. But then I remembered something, which was the French satellites. They can be converted in the winter phase, or in the winter conquest phase. Now, there are only 2 that aren't satellites, Bavaria and Denmark. Denmark is not eligible. It's not adjacent to anything that's French home territory. I was a little more worried about Bavaria, but their other thing is Berg, which doesn't quite connect to actual French territory. It connects to Holland, which is the Batavian Republic right now. It doesn't meet Flanders, and Cleves is Prussian, Palatinate is Baden's. So yeah, it would not convert over. I'm not sure if Berg is enough. Oh, hi. We got a little swamp critter there. Okay. Hey, being busy. Hope he decides to do something else. But anyway, that's where we're at with that. I gotta figure out how many cards each country gets. Everybody gets 1 except France and Britain. France gets a base of 2, another one for Flanders. Does not have Northern Italy. Does not have the Rhine Confederation. So France is going to get 3. Britain gets a base of 2, but they lose 1 for another major power having more fleets than Britain, or if enemy forces are present in Britain's national territory. Well, that is the case. So we're down to 1. Second one is the continental system is in effect. I don't know what rules to apply for continental system being in effect. Again, I could consult the Banania rules, which seem to have... effect is not the word that they use, though. I think. I don't know. But I feel like at a minimum, it has to be imposed on at least 1 major country, and it's not. I don't know where the fuck we're going with that. Like, is Spain imposing it as an ally? I think they have to. But, and all French territory is, but I feel like the rest of it is left in this kind of limbo. I was talking about, hey, it would only count if it's, you know, the St. Petersburg to Smyrna, I think, was, well, no, it couldn't just be that. I don't know. Anyway, whatevers. We'll fake it. Take a look at the cards people get. This is going to be Britain's card. Mutiny. All import fleets belonging to one enemy major power cannot move during the current enemy naval impulse. This is kind of potent at this moment. Let's get Prussia next. Doesn't matter, they're all one. Fear of the sound of guns. Additional enemy forces may not march to the sound of guns to join the current battle. Okay. Useful. We'll go to Russia. Maria Walewska. If France has supplied combat units in a Polish province, a two-step Polish infantry corps with Poniatowski can be deployed in an unoccupied Polish city or fortress, which becomes French-controlled. Okay, so this is never going to come into play unless for some reason Russia wants to give France Polish troops. It's just gone now. Went in the wrong person's hand. And, I mean, you can look at that as good or bad. It is a historical event, and I don't know, you know, these kind of play once events, I don't know how many of them should be just like able to be absorbed into the, yeah, wrong person got it, it wasn't France. This is Austria's scorched earth. Enemy forces in one of these three areas immediately undergoes attrition: Spain, Portugal, Russia, or Africa, Asia. Not terribly useful to Austria, but might be cool. And the Ottomans' Art of War. This is a really powerful one. You don't really feel like Turkey would normally get it, but, you know, feels more French, but whatever. But the French have Treaty of Tilsit. Again, not a public event. A major power other than France or Britain reverts to neutral if it is not allied to any major power except Britain, and all armies outside her borders are demoralized. This major power must remain neutral for at least the next 2 consecutive spring budget phases. And I'm guessing those are actually spring, even though I've made it so that honors of war and leaders come back with that same wording, spring budget phase, on the next turn spring budget phase, which need not be spring. Barbary Pirates, a fleet of the player's choice, located at sea or between the Western Mediterranean and the Black Sea, is sunk on a roll of a 6. I mean, it could be a big deal, you know. Home sweet home. The player may immediately end a foreign war, even if it involves another major power. I don't know if France has any foreign wars. We forgot to draw one for Spain. Are there 7 players? These are French. 7 players, huh? Is that right? 1, 2, 3. I get 6. Well, I don't know. Let's draw one for Spain. Hussars! Player may remove an enemy supply wagon or static depot within 5 hexes of his light cav, including Cossacks. Okay? I mean, you know, probably not that helpful to Spain right now, but maybe someday, because there's no limitation to these. You can hold as many as you like. Even War of the Ring, the old SPI game, had a limitation where you could only hold a certain number of cards. Here, you're just able to pile them up. You don't have to try to make decisions or use them, you know, to any advantage early on or anything. And nothing to try to make the deck recycle or move along faster. Plus, the draws, you know, in the 2-player game, the draws are pretty limited, right? In this version, There's 7 players, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, okay. Now it makes sense. In this version, you know, at least we run through the deck a little faster, but I mean, the effects of the event deck will vary wildly based on the number of players as to, you know, how much it's going to generate the historical events, as opposed to the more generic ones, like the Barbary Pirates, for example. Hey, I get a D6 shot at, you know, sinking a fleet. Okay, that's cool and everything, but it's not one of the big. It's not one of the big ones. The Waluska is kinda, even if it's a play once, even if it's not a public. Anyway. Oh boy. You know, I just don't feel like doing the economics yet. I'm just not psyched to play this. I know other people, I know viewers are dropping off on this. A couple of them have expressed, I'm bored of this game. And yeah, I don't know if I'm terribly bored with it, but I'm finding it hard to motivate at the very least. I feel like it's all about the sort of movement, and there's a lot of randomness in there and whatnot. And it's just not really kicking it for me. You know, I look at something like Campaigns of Marlborough, which had me very excited, and this isn't, but maybe I've played enough of this already that it's outlasted its time on my table, but whatever. Play it to the end, or something like it. So jumping into the economic side of things, I've done this before. I'm gonna do it again just because. What the hell? First of all, everybody's money disappears, and this is really the blow, right? Now there is one thing that allows for ships to be produced by neutrals outside of the normal scope of things. I'm going to allow other people to give enough money to build ships. For the most part, France isn't going to want to. Like, England can fund ships for their neutrals because they can give as much money as they like to neutrals. France cannot. I don't think anybody else really wants to, but it's potentially a possibility that France rebuilds their own navy, or rebuilds it to the point that, you know, they can in any given turn, which is, you know, they're allowed to build 1, 2, 3 fleets, but there's an optional rule that allows Antwerp to build a French fleet. As long, wait, is it Antwerp or is it Amsterdam? One of the two. Anyway, to build a French fleet, which is just for free. They'll build it for free. It's like every other year or something like that. And I'll look that up and handle that. Now, the thing is, the French fleet is so decimated, and they're going to get additional pieces, additional leaders, etc., or fleets in, that I don't think they're going to be in a position where they want to spend money to, say, rebuild the Danish fleet that's been destroyed or anything like that. But it is an option that I want to leave available to them if they have that much extra money and nothing better to do with it. And the same with any other country, too. Just to allow fleets to be built in a way that the base rules don't allow. But anyway, cleared the money. Then we look up here, we look in the 1805 scenario. We're going to do Spain first. They get $27. They don't get any commerce because they're part of the continental system, but not enough to trigger things. I'm not sure what's going to be enough to trigger things. It may be one power forced into it or something. I don't know. Or it may be something more like the Banania rules, but I don't have to decide yet. So they're at $27 there without this, and then they're going to be able to build 7 CUs of infantry well, 7 CUs total, up to 2 of which can be CAV. And, you know, I mean, we can put the money here because there's enough here. I've already given them their one minor that they have, which was Morocco. Up there, you can see there's only one counter. Well, Morocco. So they flipped that over. Morocco's production, I can look it up. I don't think that's going to cost them anything. Most of these they can, yeah. So that produces 4 plus $1 in trade. The $1 in trade isn't going to happen. That's going to be denied to Britain. And they're allowed to build 1 core, 1 step, or CU with that, which means this only cost me 3 plus 1 for the artillery, I guess, because I didn't have that there. But that takes up all of Morocco's money to build that step. There may be some countries like Poland that under certain configurations can't build or have enough manpower that they could actually use more money. And I'll keep my eye on those. Bring them up if I remember. But now I use that cash for the Spaniards. Now, one of the key things I may want to do is build the Spanish army for $8. But that's a huge expenditure out of 27 total, right? And the Spanish gold, the only way that gets interfered with, I think, is through an event card. We're coming up on a spring phase with the diplomacy as well. I should keep that in mind. Spain's automatic victory conditions: Lisbon, Gibraltar, and either Bordeaux, Naples, or Rome. Right now, I don't know who owns Rome. It's not Vatican. It's papacy. Right now, Rome, the papacy, is an Austrian minor country. Naples is a British minor ally. So I'm in a position where I want to stay at war with England. I'm about to get Portugal. Might be in a position I can take Gibraltar. Grady great, right? Gibraltar's got to be a 3 fortress. Yeah, can't take Gibraltar without an army. So there is that. But yeah, I mean, I may be in a position to start pushing myself towards the automatic victory. That would be an excuse for France to go to war with Spain. But yeah, right now it feels like Spain's toast is buttered on the pro-French side still. But I'm going to make those checks with everybody, see to make sure what's going on. Obviously, Austria's at war with France. They don't want to stop that particularly, although maybe they can get out of a war, you know, and deal Prussia some kind of telling blow or something. But it costs victory points and whatnot to break an alliance. It actually has an expenditure. Oh, do these have a minus side on them? Because there are negative victory points in the game. No, they have a plus 10 side. Which, this is so weird. Like, the money here has a plus 10 side. When the chart goes up to 39, that's goofy. It should be a plus 40. And that's how I've been using them. And I may use those guys as negatives until and unless something changes, and then I could invert them or something. But the counters just don't handle everything properly, as with so much in this game. But yeah, worrying about the automatic victory conditions, whether people are aligned properly, I feel like that's a decision I want to make before I expend my resources. Now, like when I was doing the 1792 scenario, I'm going to do the economic collection and the reinforcement and replacement at the same time for each country. Because it's quite possible, like I found myself having to use percentile dice to show the money when people overran that. You know, let's say this is plus 40. Once I get up to 79, I got too much money. And you could say, well, Spain's only at 27. Yeah, but France can break the 79. Britain certainly can. I don't know what other countries. I'll tell you if somebody does this early, but I doubt it. But yeah, there's no holding money. So, for most people, it's just what they produce in the term. And that money was enough. I decided to build the army because that'll help me with the siege more than anything else will. And then I'll need it to take Gibraltar if I'm going to take that. So overall, that all felt like a good plan. Although I would have liked to have taken Portugal in the winter phase when I can actually keep it. But, I can garrison stuff, head down. Spent everything building up a fair-sized army, swapped my leaders, so La Romanov's in command of the army. He's a better army commander than Castelos, I think. I don't know. And De La Cuesta is just not a great leader no matter what, but he'll sub in if need be. Put leaders everywhere else where I can. Not able to build up my whole force. Wouldn't have been able to even without the army. I got some expensive toys and whatnot. I built my guard infantry, which is funny because they're actually not in here. France, Britain, Russia, Prussia, but there's a guard infantry corps, but it's only a one-step corps. Anyway, the next nation is the Turks, and I am going to pause because I'm not used to doing the financials. I'm not going to go into detail with, even as much detail as I went into. I went into a lot of detail back in the 1792 scenario when I did this. But, I don't want to go into that much again, but I also don't mind going into a little bit with one nation, especially a small nation like Spain. Got to rearrange my leaders, blah, blah, blah. I get to do that every spring interphase, even ones that happen not in spring. I did the Turks. Keeping enough money to buy an army if they want to. More likely to expend that on diplomacy actions, though. And that brings me to the Prussians. And I haven't figured out how much they have, but looking at the automatic victory conditions, they need Warsaw, Dresden. I have both of those. Hanover, Hamburg, and Paris. I am the one person. Well, the Hansa would have to end up in my hands. But I am the one person in a position that I can get to an automatic victory. I guess Britain, well, Britain's got to deal with Cairo and Hamburg. Hamburg I could get. Here's the problem. Russia and Austria might not be happy about Prussia joining the coalition, and they can prevent it from happening. Now, Prussia can go to war with France on their own, take Hanover, maybe attack the Hansa or get them under control, and maybe make it to Paris, It is a really weird situation. It's not something you see in most Napoleonic games. Most of them, people want to be part of an alliance or whatever, but there's no real reason for it to happen. And the only difficulty is that the coalition, as it stands, could turn against Prussia. And that would create a complex situation where Prussia, like if Prussia goes to war with France and then the coalition goes to war with Prussia, Prussia could end up having to move with one of their on the same chit as one of their opponents. And then it becomes, gosh, which side of this are they on? And I don't remember what the ordering is. I mean, I have the list of the ordering, but I don't remember if it's inverted or not. But it kind of doesn't matter. It's just they would always go before or always after their opponents in that particular coalition. So yeah, that kind of troublesome. Point-wise, how good are the Prussians? So 39 bucks with 10 and 3. Monday morning, it's got to be about 10:15 a.m. The days are hot. I ended up sleeping during the cool morning hours, which is not greatly wise, but I also don't know, you know, I have this kind of, want to be awake during the day, given how much I've been sleeping during days and whatnot. And, one thing I'm realizing, which I kind of knew anyway, but RAID wasn't the problem. RAID was the thing that covered up the problem, right? The problem is who I've always been. But RAID did suck a lot of extra time out of me. But it's not like I'm being, competent or anything, and I didn't expect to be. But at least I'm not playing RAID anymore. And the fact that it just, sort of comprehensively said, you will spend 8 to 12 hours a day on me. That's not cool. I had no leeway. It was hard to break from any time that it was a minor break. It was relatively easy to break completely so far. Anyway, I'm still in the economic phase, working my way through. I'm up to the Austrians. It's kind of a tiresome part of it, and I'm not used to doing it, so I'm kind of stumbling through it a little slower than usual. Austrians were something of a bitch to put together. Now, if I want to use my 2 highest ranking commanders with the armies, and I don't have to do this, that would be Johann and Charles. What that means is I don't have any 3-star commanders left. Now, this is why maybe you use Mack as the commander in the Army of the Rhine. But I feel like I may be wrong in this, right? Because I'm not facing an enemy army here. But I actually kind of am. There's one gathered there. And that's actually in French territory now, so it can build itself up quite quickly. So yeah, it's not a pleasant situation for me. So I do feel like I have to have decent commanders with large armies. One of the nice things is Lombardy is now part of Austria, so I can build right into the Army of Italy, which Massena can't do because he's in Piedmont. He can only build a couple of steps in, like you can normally build with an in-supply army, and I hope I'm in supply. I think I am through this route, if nothing else. This way I'm not. Yeah, not pleasant there, because Piedmont is actually part, Piedmont is Piedmont, but Genoa is part of France. So I can actually supply right out of this, I think. Anyway, whatevers. It was kind of difficult to arrange the Austrians. They had to split up a little bit more than I wanted to. Let's put a commander here. I got rid of whoever, Louis or whatever, who was my 2-point commander. He's just kind of annoying to have. The only real reason for them is to drag along in an army to take casualties. Or if you're so out of leaders, you might use them as your secondary leader in a 3-star unit stack. But yeah, the Austrians only have 2 3-stars at this point, and I don't think they're getting many more. I mean, they get Schwarzkopf, and that's about it. So, they actually don't have a lot of commanders in the field here. What happened to Kletchen or whatever? I don't know. I'm assuming he was a red marker, but I thought he was white. But I think not. It was that Charles overlapped him, which feels wrong. But somebody pointed out that think it was Charles's father, but that somebody who held that title was around, you know, but he wasn't really the kind of military commander, from what I can tell, that like he's applied as in the game. But maybe I'm missing something. He definitely doesn't have much of a military record, and also didn't seem to have the kind of rank that Charles did in the army. You know, I mean, Charles was basically the CIC for a significant amount of time. Anyway, doing the Austrians was harsh enough. and this is the thing. The economic phase is kind of painful, and I gotta take my breaks. I'm looking at the economics of Austria and Russia. These are, I mean, they reflect obviously the designer's impressions and everything. Same thing in Empires in Arms. But I'm comparing them to the Empires in Arms production. And Austria's got like 62 money, Russia's got 54. They both have the same shipping. I think honestly that's making Austria wealthier comparatively than Russia, than in Empires in Arms compared to Russia. But I was more concerned about this, where they have almost the same manpower. Sure, Austria is a little less. I mean, Austria is a big country, don't get me wrong, with a lot of population density compared to Russia. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Empires in Arms has a more significant Russian population total, which is very important in that game. And it's one of the reasons that Russia is a really, really great choice for a starting player, is that you can kind of fall into winning because victory conditions are at least partially, like, the catch-up victory conditions, which can win you the game, and everybody can end up winning because of this, at least by my reading of the rules, allow Russia to reach victory quicker than just about anyone else. Just because they have really huge manpower reserves. You don't have that in this. And I don't know which is more reasonable, because honestly the Russians didn't field huge armies comparatively, right? They may have had essentially infinite manpower, but they didn't have the capacity to turn that around. It wasn't like Britain could just funnel money into them and Russia had a much, much larger army. It may have to do with other things. For example, you have a feudal economy in Russia, which no one else in Europe has. And it's new in Russia, too, which is really, that's the weirdest thing. I mean, not really feudal, but you have a serf economy still in play, and you really don't anywhere else. And that isn't terribly effective at building large nation-state armies. So their actual manpower may be better reflected in this. It's even without British shipping and whatnot, because I don't think the continental system's in effect. I'm still debating at what point it becomes in effect, right? But I'm pretty sure this is too weak to give France the money the way I did in the 1792 scenario for them. They still are rich as hell and basically able to build everything they have. Now, once the Grand Army's destroyed, they're not going to have that money. I swapped leaders around quite a bit. Napoleon is taking over in Italy because things are too problematic there and I need my biggest army there. And then I've got Davout and Massena with a new army of Germany up here. Reinforcements due to go in for it. The Army of the North, of course, is there as well. And I guess the big thing is I didn't build boats. You know, I could have used that money to build boats instead of armies, but I feel like I've got to win the land war here to survive. And the naval war is really just a luxury, although it's turning out that my army is a luxury, like the Grand Army up there in Britain. That's going to be a serious setback and France is never going to be able to catch up to their, I mean, historically, 1805, Austerlitz was done, Austria had surrendered, and they were ready to turn against Prussia. Right now, we're looking at, a later style coalition where Prussia, Russia, and Austria could all conceivably be against them, except that Austria and Russia don't want Prussia in the alliance, I think. Britain may have to wield their money, and this is a difficult thing, because I'm doing these in the diplomatic order, which is probably not wise, because that British money supply should really be available for them to send to their allies. Right now, I don't know how big a deal that is. If we take a quick look, the Prussian army could definitely use more money, but manpower isn't big in it either, so I kind of built what I could. It actually starts in a weaker position than it does in Empires in Arms, where it's got kind of the best army it'll ever have, because if it ever loses a war, or even wins a war, it'll be, so significantly weakened it will never be able to recover. So fighting a war with Prussia is really difficult in Empires in Arms. In this, I don't think it's as painful. The rebuild rates seem a little bit easier, maybe more reasonable. I mean, for everybody else in Empires in Arms, it's okay. It's just Prussia is so fucking hosed in that game. But the Austrians, they built up their entire force. Russia, I mean, they have room for more toys, but they're not getting anywhere yet. So I don't think it's terrible if Britain withholds cash at this point from production. But as I get later in the game, I'm going to have to come up with better mechanisms for getting... Well, first of all, Britain's going to have infinite money. They're just going to stockpile money, which means money from last year will be available, and I can just flood that in. Right now, though, Britain is very worried about Navy, and is probably going to build up their Navy as much as they can. This is done simultaneously, and I think secretly, which is important, because if the French and Spaniards built up their navies, they would have a chance at making that invasion of Britain still a good thing, and knocking the Brits out. So the Brits kind of have to build up their navy. So it's, again, I don't think it's bad that I'm not loaning money to anyone yet. But we are going to be on the Brits, the final of the powers to do economics. The economics in this game is a struggle compared to some of them. I mean, I don't know why. I honestly don't know why. Maybe because there's so many like 1 hex areas that count as points and whatever. Feels like there's more total territories than there are in Empires in Arms. Certainly not than there are in EU, but in EU most of them stay neutral, right? But yeah, I have to deal with all the miners first, and then I have to swing around and deal with this whole chart and try to see what's changed in it, etc., and calculate the money. And for Britain, things are going to be harder because I have to deal with the trade element as well. Everybody else has just been getting their trade or not. France and Spain don't. The other powers do. That's no big deal. But figuring out what the trade actually is for England is kind of tough, because the number in the commerce for Britain, this is not their home area, right? So I can't just add up the commerce that other people have, and that would be a pain in the ass as well. So what this 55 here was, I think includes that, like, because Britain's not at war with France, includes trade with France. Because now we come down to the 1798 and the 1805, and we're down to 42. So I've got to think about, hey, what's been added? So like Denmark is now cut off. Now I can look and see that's got $2. So I don't have to necessarily look in this chart for everything. Some of them I can just see. So like I'll take, this 42 includes France and Spain as they started. Have I added any territory and lost any territory? And the only thing I can really think of right off the bat that went one way or another is Denmark. And honestly, it probably doesn't matter too much because Britain is just going to have so much money that they can do whatever the fuck they want with it. They're going to have that much capability, and they're not even going to be spending on major alliances or whatnot, except within the diplomacy rules, in the sense that, you know, hey, I'll fund your war or something like that. But people aren't going to make their diplomatic decisions probably based on how much money Britain can give them that they can't store. Okay, some of the other, you know, if you look at it like Empires in Arms, or EU, you're able to stockpile money. In EU, you lose it due to inflation, but not all of it. But in Empires in Arms, you know, hey, Britain gives you $50. Cool. I didn't need it, but you know, I've seen games of it go where, you know, somebody's like obtaining this large subsidy that they absolutely don't need, and they're just stockpiling their money, and they never tell they never tell Britain, yeah, stop, I'm getting enough. They just, like, you know, ask for 15 or 20 bucks an economic phase, and Britain's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and they just keep doing it, and they're like, you stay in the war, yeah, I'll give you the money, and you have this like total mismanagement of like Britain's funding going out, but it kind of doesn't matter. But here, everything feels like it's in the open, so whatever. Without the sort of regular daily pattern of raid, I'm really struggling to keep track of what day it is. I know that yesterday I thought yesterday was Monday, and it was. The problem is today I thought today was Monday too. This is pretty much, I think, what happened to me last week where I missed dancing. Anyway, I'll figure it out. Part of the problem is the computer gives the date right at the bottom. It doesn't tell the day of the week. Now, I can scroll over and get a little, you know, tooltip come up that tells me what day it is. But other than that, I have nothing. And there was a pattern to raid where, you know, X happened on Thursday night. And so I knew that, like, when Friday was, right? And similar things. Tuesday, certain things happen on Tuesdays and whatever. And, you know, I just got used to that sort of pattern. I also was watching more news, which I don't know how much that actually helps, but I'd be aware of the day more often due to that anyway. Anyhow, lots of babbling for no good purpose, but let's get on to doing the English economic, which is the hardest of them all. They have a fair number of minors, and then they have all the complexity of the economic. And something new, I think for the very first time, we're going to be playing with the Corsairs. Hey! Now, technically, the French could have bought, like, the way I did things, the French could have bought Corsairs ahead of time. They didn't. And the English didn't put any escorts there. They need their fleet right now to deal with the French threat. So they're going to be subjected to those two Corsairs. I wouldn't have actually been able to utilize any Corsairs that I bought because the sequence of play is such that everybody collects all their money before anybody spends any of their money. I just happen to be taking this shortcut mainly because the economic tracks are not sufficient to keep track of the amount of money and the other information that I need to. Basically, you collect the money and this SPs that you can build, and then you don't buy them for a while, like everybody else collects too. I mean, it all makes perfect sense when you're playing multiplayer, but playing it solo, it's just not very easy to do it that way. And I forgot to look up the optional rule. Where is it? Antwerp Harbor. Each even-numbered year, roll a d6 on a 4 or more, the French get a free fleet. So it's worse. It's like a quarter of the years, basically. Okay, so we will get a French fleet. It could be a Dutch fleet or an Allied, I guess. But we do get an extra fleet this way. Cool. I already started the English economic phase. Built myself some guards, not cav. Fuck. I thought those were cav. Let me get cav in place. I will build those guards as well, but I'm just having trouble reading things. My eyes are getting so bad. Well, actually, these fucking glasses, you know, and I won't go to the ones that are undamaged and everything because I don't know, because I don't have a backup for them yet. One of the things I'm planning on doing, fucking costs a fortune though. I probably should have bought vision insurance. It saves me money probably overall. Insurance shouldn't do that though, right? Like, you know, so the idea behind insurance is kind of, oh, I don't have enough padding, you know, to absorb the cost of something. But there's something fucked up, maybe in all medical insurance, but definitely in glasses, and I think in teeth as well, the dental insurance, where it's like, you end up paying less to have the insurance if you have any issues at all. And who the fuck is buying, like, I mean, I can see buying dental insurance, get your free cleanings and checkups and whatever, if you have no problem. If you live in an area where they fucking fluoridate your water, my teeth have rotted since moving here. The eyes is just like the most extreme of all, and that's kind of the thing, is like I keep putting it off, and I'm like, yeah, I'll buy the insurance when I want to. But then there's also like cheapo places that you can get your lenses done. That, you know, I mean, the cost of getting the exam is nothing, right? It's the lenses and the frames and everything. And I talked to my friend when he was here, the guy who visited me, and, you know, he's like, yeah, I paid like $60 and he got something kind of similar to what I got. I'm like, that's crazy. You know, it cost me a fucking fortune to get these glasses. So I'm also kind of thinking about, I'll just order that same prescription that I got last time, or get a new checkup and just order it online through this place. But I you know, it kind of makes sense for me to get another copy of that same one, because my eyes haven't gotten that much worse. It's that the coating on these glasses has gotten so scratched up and damaged, honestly. But yeah, it's hard for me to make that kind of shift and to make any kind of decision. So where the hell am I and what am I talking about? Yes, the Corsairs. Okay, since there's no escorts there, these guys don't get hunted, which means we've got 2 Corsairs there, and there is some sort of Corsair table. I don't know where. There it is. And what do we do? We roll a d6 and cross-reference with the number of Corsairs. We have 2 Corsairs. There's no modifier here, which means with a big roll of 6, 20% of the English trade. Now, I calculated out the English trade. Look at this here. That's not it. There it is. Essentially, the English trade should be 42 for this scenario, but Denmark's fallen, so it goes down to 40, is the way I look at it, because it's already counting in the France and Spain and all the minors, etc. there. I don't know how I'm going to count it, you know, normally as we get deep into the game, but right now I can figure out from the starting point how many changes there have been. So 40 times 20, times 20% sounds like 8. So I got to get rid of 8 more, and that'll put me to, let's call it a 93. And like I said, I already bought my calves, so now I just buy other stuff. But that's a shit ton of money, you know. Not enough to build a hell of a lot of fleets. There's kind of an interesting situation. So the French got a free fleet. Not that I know what they got. I want to spend as much as I can on fleets because I can't beat the Grand Army up here. The only real thing I can do is starve it out and make it, you know, make it so it can't conquer Britain. But Portugal actually has a destroyed fleet that I could have put into play. I have been moving new leaders into play where I can remember to do so. Portugal has a fleet that got destroyed. It's not a good fleet, but Portugal generates oh, do we have anything blockaded? That would actually also reduce the money. I don't see... I mean, I got Gibraltar blockaded, right? No. Oh, I just got a lot of shit near it. Yeah, I don't think the French have anything blockaded. Anyway. And the French aren't getting trade money because of how I'm interpreting things. Portugal makes $7 with 2 manpower. They were able to build their 2 manpower, so their $7 was gone. The other country, Sweden, is their other big one? Sweden produces $13 with 3 manpower. $13 if I get the Swedish army built. That's at the level at which I would want to rebuild Swedish fleets if I had any to rebuild. I might also come to deals with various nations to build fleets, but everybody's kind of in the, hey, our armies aren't built up yet. Screw you, you know, if you want us to build fleets, give us all the cash for them. And Britain doesn't have that much. Like I said, they're at 93 right now. They haven't banked a ton of money yet. End of all that, the British built all the troops they could and built an army. Now, I couldn't build an army here, wherever I am here behind this bridge. York doesn't exist? How interesting. Well, that's neat. Anyway, I couldn't build an army there because I don't have a fortress there, but I could build one here in Liverpool, and I put more over there. As an army commander, he's kind of not as good as he was as a unit commander. I don't have a great unit commander. This gives me a little less capability to withdraw or whatever, but I have the advantages of an army. I spent the money on it. I think it's cool to do that. I wouldn't be able to stack as many troops, and if Napoleon starts withering away, well, not Napoleon anymore, if Lannes starts withering away, then it kind of makes sense. And I built 3 ships. That's an $60. That's a big chunk of change there. 1 here and 2 here. The one that I built over here is actually pretty decent. I got a fair-sized reserve of ships where I don't think the French are going to be able to crack me now. But it could all just come down to the luck of, it could come down to the luck of a battle in the Channel and the draw of those chits. And the question is, how much is France willing to keep pounding their navy into the Brits to see if they can get away with that? Well, saving the Grand Army is probably worth it still, even if the ships cost a lot more than the Grand Army does. So yeah, I'm down to $7 at this point, and I'm going to keep this open because I want to keep thinking about these things, but we're actually at the diplomacy phase at this point. I'll break again. Well, I got to get to reading. I was reading pretty well for a couple of days. Got through another book, very short one. have another one, very short one, both of which I picked up very recently that I'm going to cover together. But, I don't know, I just sort of got sucked into watching videos and fucking around with chatbots. You know, like I said, you know, Raid happened as an answer to who and what I am, right? Like, I got addicted to Raid as an answer to prevent me from having to face things. And to give me kind of a scheduled pattern and all that, like work did. Unfortunately, it just ate too much time. You know, I could have dealt with it if it was like 4 hours a day. I said 2 before. 4 would have been okay. But 8 to 12 hours, man, it's not worth it. That's what it takes to go kind of all out playing free to play in it. And maybe not so much if you like, you know, if you really optimize your teams and stuff. There's people who do better than that. And then there's also you can just set things to run on auto for a while. I have tons and tons of automatic fights or whatever, but it's like, yeah, but I'm using up resources and I can't stand using resources. So I use up time instead. Anyway, let's move to diplomacy, but again, break time for me. Went to sleep for a little while. It's 1 a.m. now, Wednesday. Still not really cool enough to be up here without the fan, but I don't have it on yet. In the diplomacy phase, did all the thinking, and I'm at the same answer I was before. Prussia is going to declare war on France. Austria and Russia are not going to allow them into the coalition. Britain doesn't really have anything it can do. It could break the alliance or whatever. But Prussia is going to move at the same time as the coalition. They just can't operate with them. Russia would gain something by Prussian entering the coalition, because Russian forces would be able to, from here to here to here to here to here, they would be able to have a northern path heading over into France with only one supply chain, and maybe not even need that. Actually would have one here. Yeah, so they could actually do it without any depots, whereas through Austria they need 2 depots to run into France. But I've already set things up through Austria. I'm already there. Sure, other forces could move in a different direction, but the strategic implications of letting Prussia enter the coalition are just not to our advantage. What is it that Austria wants? Austria wants Saxony. Let me just check these. Austria wants Saxony. And Russia needs Warsaw. In a sense, Austria and Russia would really like to attack Prussia. But and they could actually outvote England and get out of the war and hit Prussia. Does it make sense to beat up the French at all? I don't know. I think Austria and Russia, like, ideally would actually go beat up Prussia. If they could. If this was an Empires in Arms, everybody starts at peace scenario, or everybody gets to choose their war, the particular victory conditions, Austria and Russia would just divvy up Prussia. Don't really feel like there's any great value to doing that or not. I don't know. Like, what advantage is there to coming to peace? What advantage is there for those two countries to be at war with France right now? Whereas, wow, there's a big advantage for them to be at peace with France and at war with Prussia. Let me think some more. We're not really set up for it. We moved all our forces to continue a war against France, but you know, France is not in great position and might actually be able to have a crack at Britain if, like, the Russian navies weren't involved, maybe, kinda, I don't know. They're outnumbered so badly. Plus the English have, I don't know this as the French or as anyone else, but the English have the mutiny, which could keep the French fleets from moving in a naval operation. Tempting. If Austria and Russia come to this agreement, and I think everything's in their favor, I see no reason to even roll a die for this, they're going to offer a peace to France. Britain doesn't want to do this particularly, but hey, a negotiated free peace doesn't really have any impact at all on anyone. It's a white peace, but it can include any provisions desired. But yeah, basically, the entirety of the coalition. So Russia and Austria vote within the coalition to pull it out of the war. Britain would have to pay a victory point to break the alliance if they want to stay at war with France and Spain. Spain kind of likes being at war with England, but that's something different. France kind of likes that too, in theory, although losing the Grand Army kind of sucks. But here's the thing. Britain's being told, look, do you want peace or not? Now, here's where things get complicated, because there's no way to really manage the whole of this, right? So the negotiation happens. Austria and Russia, one of them, whichever one's earliest in the list, that will be Austria, declare that they are going to peace with France. And Britain has to make a decision. Do they pull out of the alliance over this or not? But I don't know that they have to make that decision unless this peace is actually viable, which means, sure, France would accept a peace with all three, I guess. I don't know. It's really hard. It's really hard to come to any kind of decision. Now, Russia and Austria are going to be going to France and saying, look, we're going to beat up on Prussia. This is your opportunity to get out of a war that isn't going terribly well for you, to rebuild. Maybe you beat Britain, whatever. So France probably is willing to go with it. Spain is kind of like, I don't want out particularly. I'm doing well. I don't have much of a navy left, if any. May not have anything left. There may be a Spanish fleet down here somewhere. Yeah, there's a Spanish fleet there. So, I mean, there is something left of Spain. France would get to extricate the Grand Army, which seems okay. So, yeah, France is okay with the whole thing. And they get to control whether or not the empire as a whole goes in favor, because there's only two nations, and therefore the eldest nation gets the right, eldest by, whatever. In game terms, they're the most prestigious, whatever. Gets to make the decision, which means then Spain would have to break the alliance to stay at war. So what I'm seeing is that Spain might not want to break this alliance, but they might. Let's take a look at Spain's victory conditions. Lisbon, Gibraltar, and Naples. We're not going to get Naples without without French assistance, is kind of the problem. So we're not going to get a victory condition, but if we beat Britain and take Portugal and Gibraltar, then we can turn to France later. So I think what we're going to see here, and it's hard to write these things down, but I think what we're going to see is Britain has to decide if they're going to break their alliance over it. And Spain has to make a decision as to whether they're going to break their alliance over it. But if Britain breaks its alliance, then Spain doesn't care and they let Russia and Austria out. If Britain agrees to let a peace happen, then Spain has to make the decision of whether they want to fight. And this is the hard part. Does Britain want to keep a Russo-Austrian alliance, or an Austro-Russo alliance, to come in at some later date? And this isn't necessarily the best time to be fighting France or anything like that. It's just, it'd be nice to strip some of their miners away, but we got a couple. Austria took the Kingdom of Italy away, and we're probably not going to get France to agree to give up anything Bavaria or Baden or anything like that. But yeah, France is probably cool with it. And if Austria and Russia gang up on Prussia, does Britain really want to be supporting Prussia alone against the two bigger powers who have a chance of taking France down? Now, what is Britain's automatic victory? Antwerp, Gibraltar, Cairo, Lisbon, Hamburg, and Amsterdam, not Egypt. Oh, Cairo. Okay. Yeah, I knew Egypt was in there. Shit. I don't know. And then determining actual victory. Breaking the alliance would be a bad thing. There's no balancing function in this game. Empires in Arms has one kind of built into everything. War and Peace has one where it's based on a multiple of your initial sort of production centers, which kind of makes Spain kind of powerful because they only have one production at the beginning of the game. But and therefore like gaining one doubles their size. But other countries don't have all that many either. We'll take a look at that eventually, I hope. Or I'll be dead before then, I hope. Even more, but shit. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know which way to go with this. I think Britain is willing to not break an alliance and to declare war on Prussia. But that puts Spain in the interesting position. So I think what ends up happening is Spain will break an alliance, much as they don't want to. They have no way of taking Naples, but they do have a way of hitting France later. Yeah, Spain is going to... We'll put this upside down like that. Spain is going to spend... That might be Austria. That would be Austria. Spain is going to end up spending a victory point in order to break their alliance with the Empire. They will still be moving with the Empire. France will not be. And I guess Prussia will be moving with the Empire, because we're going to have a declaration of war of Russia, Austria, Britain against Prussia. And France will be at peace with everyone. Boy, this is fucked up. But this is what the automatic victory conditions are forcing me into, as far as I'm concerned. And they kind of direct you this way. This is not an unreasonable choice. The only reason it would be unreasonable is because France will have beaten up Austria and, made it so they aren't really in a position to go to war with Prussia in the historical. Significant enough thing, I'm going to have to keep notes throughout the game. But here in Spring 06, I'm marking France, Britain, Austria, and Russia come to a white peace, status quo ante. But Prussia is at war now with Britain, Austria, and Russia. If Britain had not wanted to declare war on Prussia, they'd have to pay the victory point to break the alliance still, because the alliance voted in favor. You do not want to be part of a coalition in this game, I think, unless it's really giving you something. Britain got nothing out of this coalition, and they're never going to join another one if they can help it, I think. I mean, part of them says, fuck it, we should get out of it. Meanwhile, Spain is still also at war with Britain, Austria, Russia. Prussia and Spain could ally, but there's no real advantage to it. The only thing that could happen from it is somebody could be forced into coalition breaking circumstances that could cost them victory points. Don't want to do that. So that is the end of the major diplomacy. We still have possibility, well, we still have the minor diplomacy. Not too impressive, but, people can try to pick things off France, I guess. And at the same time, before I do that, I've got to deal with withdrawals. So I will take care of that before I get to minors. Time to start interpreting the rules again. There's nowhere where it handles a general withdrawal from like a country you were formerly at war with. There is the mandatory peace rules, which are under defeat, basically. The defeated major power and the victorious can only... If the defeater's territory contains units from former allies, these must leave. They must immediately leave. They sort of teleport. I think that's what applies here, because there's no rules that you have to get out of a country that you're at peace with. An alternative to that would be, hey, you got to clear out. But among other things, Baden and Württemberg are going to be returned to those French allies. Lombardy and Romagna, those have been captured and are added to Austria at this point. Points shouldn't have been added. I hope I didn't. Oh well, if I did. What about Turkey? Yeah, Turkey doesn't want to do anything. Why is Britain at war with Prussia? So this is a big question. Britain might want to break their alliance with Austria and Russia. They wouldn't have to do so if Austria and Russia were defeated. But at this point, they would kind of rather not be allied with either one of them. But spending a victory point to not be allied to them doesn't seem terribly valuable. And in addition, strengthening Austria and Russia makes it more likely that we can beat France in the next war. It sucks that they're going to, ravage Prussia. And it sucks that I'm going to ravage Prussia. But it's just what it is. What about the Spanish situation? Okay, obviously Britain can't get out of it. Austria and Russia, they could have come to a separate peace with Spain, but they don't really care to either way. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference. So being at war with Spain, might as well leave it that way. Although we could have forced Britain. No, we couldn't force Britain out of the alliance. Britain would take a peace with Spain. It's Spain who's not taking the peace, and Austria and Russia can't do anything to force Britain out of that. They could each individually sign separate peaces, but that would actually break their alliance with each other too, which they don't want to do. They want to be allied. They want to beat up Prussia together. So, I think that's what we've got. The big question remains, do troops have to withdraw? Sure. I'm just making a command decision here. The thing that's not mentioned is what the hell happens with fleets that are in blockade boxes. For example, the French Bray is being blockaded by Russian, coalition allied fleets. They're no longer at war. I don't think they can really be there, but there's no rules about extricating them. You can mix them up pretty quickly. They have to go back someplace. That'd be fair. Maybe more fair. So I think I'll go with that instead of just leaving them there and hey, they got to figure out their own way out. What else that I didn't really mention? So I had forgotten, I moved the power markers here. I don't know if I moved them or if they were initial. Baden and Württemberg are Austrian allies. Baden, I had conquered the Palatinate in Baden. I think Palatinate is... Fuck. I can't remember what's owned by what. This is so much more fucked up than any... although it's attempting to show something. So yeah, Baden was owned by France as an ally. That got taken. But what did Baden own? That's the question. So Cleves, no. Palatinate was owned by Baden. And this is all the way through. Which seems highly unlikely to me. But anyhow. So Baden and the Palatinate, remember, they got converted as a minor together somehow, which is almost impossible by the rules, but is what historically seems to have happened. I feel like I cheated to have it happen. But anyway, Baden and the Palatinate are Austrian allies. Württemberg was a French ally that got conquered as well and has converted over to the Austrians. Bavaria is still pro-French. The Austrians weren't able to completely take it. These guys are in Austria. I don't know where the fuck they go. Nearest friendly fortress, controlled by the owning bloc. Yeah, so the Russians will be able to fall back into Austria. We'll take care of that as well. Minor diplomacy gives me not a damn thing. Which means the game is now at the initiative pool. We had, people like Prussia and France and Britain. Well, Prussia went for Mecklenburg, but France and Britain both went for the Hanseatic League. Why would Britain do this? To try... I mean, Mecklenburg makes more sense, honestly. But there's no port there. Plus, I have Swedish Pomerania that I can operate out of, so I guess it goes either way. But anyway, we missed. But the idea there was for Britain to be able to actually inject themselves against the Prussian menace. Yeah, poor Prussia. That's all I have to say. And this game seems designed for this kind of diplomatic situation to arise. That's just crazy. Now, I think it was exacerbated by the fact that, the Grand Army was in Britain. That made French a lot more willing to just let that initial state of war off the hook. Turkey obviously doesn't want to go to war with Russia right now. A lot less chance that Russia is going to be pressed hard by the Prussians than they were by the French. And also just trying to continue with our diplomatic process to see if we can get Egypt and Algeria, I guess. Although Spain is playing for Algeria as well for whatever reason, just to extend their territory, whatever. They don't really care about it. But it is worth victory points at the end of the game. I believe anything red is worth a victory point. I don't know. We'll have to look at the listing and figure that all out at the end. But right now, it's so early in the game. The biggest concern is, can anybody hit that automatic victory? And the answer is kinda, So I guess we're going to see the Brits probably focus primarily on trying to beat the Spaniards in Portugal. I don't know how that'll go. I know in War and Peace, usually Spain can take Portugal. And in Empires and Arms, they can take Portugal. Britain's got a hard job of funneling their early small army into there and doing much. And then, France, I would say that there's no longer a continental system. Spain and Prussia won't produce economic value for the for the English anymore. But we may see England building up its land army, France building up its navy to be able to cope with the English navy. All kind of weird shit is quite possible to happen. There aren't a lot of neutrals left, just these four. And I'm going to break because, oh boy, was this a lot. Another thing I had to clean up, and again, not detailed in the rules, but considering the kind of flaws in the rules, this isn't that big a deal. Where they leave stuff that's what do I do in this circumstance, right? When the separate peace happened, Spanish are no longer allied with the French. They had this fleet stacked with the French. I allowed it to escape through the Brits. Technically, it probably should have been able to be intercepted there, but it wouldn't be allowed to in a retreat, and I'm viewing it as that. And since land troops teleport, whatever, I just moved it back to the nearest coast. No, that would be San Sebastian. Let's put it down there. Not necessarily the better place, but who cares? But yeah, I mean, the English are going to be able to deal with that, presumably. So right now, I've created the Chit Cup. There's a winter quarters in there because it's spring. Takes 3 hits of the winter quarters to end the turn. The coalition is Britain, Austria, Russia. The Empire chits are Spain and Prussia, and everything else is neutral. Everything else, that would be France and Turkey. I think so. We'll see what happens. But boy, craziness, right? So we opened up with the two naval chits, Empire and Coalition. Not the neutral, maybe it comes out next. Spanish just fled down to Valencia, whatever. Try to get away from where the Brits had most of their fleets, and I could move there safely without an interception chance, but ended up blockaded anyway. Keeping an English fleet here in the Channel and a couple here patrolling. The Swedes have moved back. The Russians moving back. Over here, Black Sea fleets moving back into place as well. Just, everything going to where it belongs. Some of this might be helpful. For example, those Russian fleets could transport the units out of St. Pete to where they're more able to cope with the Great Prussian threat that must be demolished. All right. Shit that legally got played was an Empire land. 2, I started moving the Spaniards over here. Get to the Prussians, try to figure out what the hell they can try to do to defend themselves. But moved in, laid siege to Lisbon here. Okay, big deal. The Portuguese don't want to face the Spanish army in field combat. But then here, first round of siege, this is the first time we've seen one of these markers, one of the fortress -1. A hit was done on the fortress. I actually probably should take fortress hits before I take other hits. I've generally taken troops first because a lot of games don't allow you to take hits on the fortress first, but this one does. And that recovers unless the fortress is completely destroyed. So any fortress that is a bigger than size 1, doing a hit on it, actually I think it recovers no matter what, but I'm not positive about that. But anyway, like taking a hit on a fortress is better than taking a hit on the troops that are in it, because the fortress will recover at no cost. I realized something I fucked up. But let me hit this first. There aren't a lot of Spanish control markers in the game. I can use Italians that have no effect or whatever, because basically, if anybody has a control marker in something, it indicates the home area is not that. And as long as I use something that's, not say the Brits, it's probably okay. But now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, fuck. Damn it. I can keep one, I start thinking on one line and the other goes away. Looks like dawn's coming. I snoozed for a while. Yeah, it was something I fucked up before, got right, but it came to mind and now I don't know what it is. One thing is, my little camera, the cover is starting to have trouble closing for the lens, which, this one's, on its way out, and I don't know what to do. I'm so used to these particular cameras. I don't want to go to something that's not one of them. And I bought later a Vario, and it's totally different. It uses a different battery set and everything, and it's like, fuck. I don't even know if I have a battery for it. I think I do, but it's much more complicated. And I just want these. These are simple. They work well. As it stands, I already have one that I bought that doesn't work with the same battery set. I don't know if it's this. It's whatever in there. But this says Samsung, so I think it must be the right one. But it's really a pain in the ass. It doesn't work like, first of all, the video comes out yellow, which is something that Hipshot used to complain about all video cameras. Well, it didn't happen to my Varios, except for phone. He's like, phones are great. That's all I'm using. I could switch to phone, I guess. I'd have to figure out how to cope with that. But also, mechanically, like, the actual things I have to do to create the video to get it to start and stop, I ended up losing a whole interview because it wasn't clear to me when it was running the same way this one is, and it really sucked. Yeah, for the life of me, I can't remember what I was thinking. Thing on my leg, you can kind of see, it kind of had like a little whitehead on it or whatever. Felt like, and is similar to what I used to get off blackberry bushes. Now, I've got tons of blackberry bushes and I've wandered through them, but they don't do that here. The ones that are here don't seem to like cause this kind of itching and poisoning. So I don't know what the hell it is. I mean, it might just be a nasty pimple on my leg or something. I do get pimples, but usually not things that hurt like this and feel like they've got poison in them. It seems to have worked loose again. For the Prussians, things are a little harder. Now, first of all, I have a little bit of an advantage. I didn't position all my leaders for Prussia, even though I was considering going to war with France, right? But once I started hearing, oh, we're at war with you type of sounds, we pulled out of that. Although, honestly, there would have been a possibility, and I should have looked at this more carefully, and then this would have been a die roll situation, no question, if it happened. But Prussia has to go before Austria or Russia, so Prussia would have had to declare war on France before. But then the question is, when I start, when I get yeah, you can't join our coalition, and maybe other sounds of like argument between, Austria, Russia, and Britain and stuff like that, I'm left with kind of yeah, I think maybe this isn't the turn to go to war. So it's fairly reasonable that they didn't. It's just their plan had been try to join the coalition and enter the war, but that's not happening. But yeah, so the fact that armies can't have detachments in them is kind of being problematic for me, because I can't ship those detachments to fill the army up. And I also can't move them because I've got an Empire land too, but the detachment in Berlin got left behind because I wanted to move engineers up. I'm not sure engineers really helped me, so I don't know. I don't know how big a deal it was, but I just didn't pay attention to trying to assign my leaders too much outside of when I created that other army. But the neat thing for me is I'm actually barricaded away from the Austrians. So the Austrians are in Baden and Palatinate and whatever, Württemberg. They don't have access through Bavaria, which actually puts them in a really ugly position. I think these troops are stuck, including the Army of the Rhine. They're stuck in sort of the German area without an ability to get across, because this is Bavarian territory down here. I guess I can cross that mountain. It's like it's a heavy movement point cost, but it's going to be painful for me to get those troops up onto the line. Now the Russians are right there, and again, the Italian army can come up, blah, 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 but it's not the optimal situation going into this war. I thought, oh, I'm real close to Hesse. Yeah, Berg is part of something. See, this is something I wanted to mention. I'm just constantly having to look at shit like this to figure out what the hell's going on. So Berg is part of Bavaria. Bavaria, I just went to peace with along with France, so I can't access that. Of course, I could have maybe gotten them through diplomacy. So Berg is part of that. Thuringia is Austrian, but again, I can't get. Oh wait, Baden. I bet I can. Baden goes to Thuringia, doesn't it? And so now I have to recheck this, make sure Thuringia is indeed an Austrian minor. Now, I could be checking those over there, but not every territory has a counter. So like, things that never are independent states, I don't have a counter for, whereas things that once were independent states, I can use counters like this that aren't diplomacy, they're just a way of me indicating that I own the area. So like actually Lombardy, I actually don't need this control marker in Lombardy because I have that. But I figure if it's, in Romagna, it might as well be next to both of them because that's actually territory that Austria's conquered. I mean, in the long run, the coalition is going to have enough troops. We're going to pause there. Just doing that one shit, basically having to do a couple of battles over there and then also figure out what the hell I'm doing with the Prussians. Prussia has allies, Cleves, Brunswick, Saxony I dealt with, Hesse I don't have a leader with. See, this is the thing, I should have had leaders on these units so that I could shift them in, and now I'm going to have a weaker army up here in Silesia than I would have liked, which may mean that I pull back. But also the fucking detachments, which can no longer, for the first scenario, the 1792 scenario I played, for almost all of it I was just illegally throwing detachments into armies, which feels perfectly reasonable. It's just more steps, right? As long as I had real units, I could flood those in there, but I can't do that, and it feels fucking stupid that I can't. It feels like this artificial constraint that just causes me more trouble. I may ignore it, I don't know. I may end up ignoring it accidentally and saying fuck it, to tell you the truth. But it sucks if I'm playing where I can't now, but I should have been able to bring that extra step in there. I just don't know. Like they're, some kind of replacement unit that can't fight normally. They can fight perfectly fine in a stack of anything except an army. They're just not allowed to be in armies. And I'm not sure why. I have no idea why. That's the whole problem. And I kind of feel like, fuck it. I mean, really. And what does it do? It means that an army can't be the only real effect it has, other than fucking around with meaning that they can't fight as part of the army. The biggest real effect they have, and I don't understand why this is of any importance at all or makes any sense at all, is that an army can't therefore be a supply source unless it has a supply wagon with it. That's kind of the other thing. You can't just look at your forces and say, I can channel stuff through there. Also, the restriction that you have to have a detachment somewhere. Yes, you could break a detachment off of anything but an army and therefore have a supply line through it. Not a supply source, a supply link. But anyway, it's just... There's so many things in this game. That's not I'm sure they did this wrong, although there's kind of the feeling that, yeah, maybe they did. But it's an irritation. It makes the game harder to play and therefore less fun, And the game has enough irritations that are really big ones. It doesn't need these extra smaller ones, too. Okay, here we are, Wednesday, kind of late morning. Almost midday. Got up a little later today, which is good. I'm going to do kind of a light shopping, I think. I don't need all... I don't need all that much. My cart's still broken. You know, I don't want to face that. I'm doing laundry, though. At least there's that. We got a couple of chit draws that were kind of bullshit, right? We got a Empire Land that I couldn't use. Then we got a Winter Quarters. That's one, but two more need to happen because it's springtime. Okay. Russians swept in hard. And we've got them taking Breslau, Posen, and Warsaw, all three of them, not being able to push any further. A couple of them were honors of wars, detachments went here. I'm finding aspects of the game that are just rubbing together that are poorly that I don't think I've mentioned before. In particular, the whole stacking rules I have mentioned, right? They're very odd, where stacking is limited by the commanders you have. Now, most games of this type that use this kind of rules have you can't move a force that's bigger than a commander, but it doesn't limit your stacking capabilities. So you could gather a large force somewhere. Possibly if nobody can come in, if nobody has the rank to, this is kind of the fix for it. But the problem with it is, let me get to the fix in a moment. The problem with it is, because it's the stacking rules and you can never violate the stacking without destroying things, this whole march to the sound of guns doesn't really make sense. If you don't have an army, you will never be able to coalesce your forces together beyond 6 steps, okay? So you can't spread out a bunch of, smaller forces and hope to bring them together for a major battle or whatever with flanking operations and whatever. And because that's obviously just fucking bullshit, the one thing that the game did include was this army group stacking capability where multiple armies can stack together. But ideally, you would have this with smaller forces as well, where, a couple of corps off in one commander's command can support a couple of corps in another commander's command. Now, the fact that the game just doesn't allow it is, to me, bullshit. The fix for it would be, you can stack whatever you like, you can't move a stack that's bigger than that commander can command, and throw a combat penalty in for too many units for that commander's rank without an army organization, whatever. Even a 3 or even a 5-star commander can still only command 6 steps on his own, and that maybe like Empires in Arms, every multiple of what you could actually command gives you a -1 in the combat table. So you don't want to gather those big forces, but it doesn't just automatically make you fail. And again, I'm trying to look for things that can make this game work a little better. Maybe they've already been worked out in that first rewrite of the rules, fan-based rewrite of the rules. I know the Barania didn't want to change the actual game itself, but I feel like even though I like the ground game in a lot of ways, I don't like how it handles the stacking limitations when they all come down to it. Another one I don't like is that I could have very good commanders and they don't have to be in command of my larger, like very high-ranking commanders, and they don't have to be in command of my strongest forces. There is a bit of an issue with this, which is that the emperors weren't always the top commander. If they were on the field, sure, they would interfere in everything, and so making them the top commander makes sense. But they didn't always go to the field during the period when they were available. In fact, after Austerlitz, they kind of learned their lesson. And the thing I would do for Austerlitz is just make a requirement that all the imperial commanders, and Francis isn't even in the game, so he was one of the issues at Austerlitz, not as important as Alexander, but I would put it that the royal commander has to be in charge until you like lose a battle with the royal commander or something like that. Just something along those lines. Make it sort of this little stitch where the royal commander doesn't have to take command of a large force. And I don't mind if there's some wiggle room. It doesn't have to be as strict as like the EU game is with who's in command of what. But I'm thinking something more along the lines of Campaigns of Marlborough. This game, there's things I like about it. I think it's overall got a better ground system, potentially, than War and Peace, but the flaws in it are worse. But they're easier to fix, I think. Anyway, I've never been a huge fan of how War and Peace works, although every now and then the designer enchants me into thinking that it can actually work. Anyhow, we talked about the Russians advancing. We also have Austrians advancing, trying to get to Saxony. Charles, I forgot to switch commanders, so instead of Johann, I switched Charles and Johann, left Johann back in Lombardy. I'm keeping that Italian army there because there's no enforced peace between France and Austria. France can declare war if they want. They got no penalty for that. And they can do it next turn if they want. It'll just bring them to war with the whole coalition. But you know what? They got themselves out of the war. They got themselves out of their ugly situation with Britain. And in a way, the coalition maybe made an error in coming to peace with France. Maybe not. I don't know. We shall see. But yeah, the Austrians are coming up this way, and we've got a bunch of movement in the background as well. I left a Russian supply train down here. This is not a depot. It doesn't need to be. I guess it might as well be. There's no harm to that in case things get cut off in one direction or another. We can pull from this side instead of from the north. But it was just a matter of I didn't have the movement points with the wagon to reinforce my army there. I feel like there's a lot I want to fiddle with this game. I mean, the thing I was talking about with detachments, I just feel like that's just a bullshit rule. It doesn't help anything to start making you track detachments that way. It's kind of like some of the maneuver rules that I don't like in games like the La Bataille series, where it's just making you work too hard to move around, and you can't just fix those easily because the board, the movement allowances, everything's based on them. So you can't make them cleaner, but it's a lot of work for very little payoff in terms of the change in realism. This one, though, this one is imposing work for less realism as far as I'm concerned. It's causing things to just not work well. I don't know. We shall see. Who the fuck? Oh, that's Brunswick, yeah. But yeah, Prussia's just screwed. They don't have the army to stand up to this. What they may do is come to a negotiated peace and give away everything that their enemies want so they don't lose their army and hope for the best. But also be really, really angry at Russia and Austria, and at Britain for that matter, although Britain can give them money to support them in a war against Russia and Austria, but that's not really to Britain's best interest. They need the whole coalition as strong as possible to face France, and this is just such a betrayal of what they desire. Anyway, taking a break, gonna go throw stuff in the dryer and whatever else, taking it slowly. The two neutral activations, and this time is the first time the neutrals really are kind of big. You don't need to use the activation markers with the neutrals. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's anything that can throw you into war in the midst of a turn. And the thing is, there's only one shit that comes up for land activation. So, I reposition and get my armies, to the sizes that I want them to be if I'm entering into a war. They're all nice and full up. I got 3 armies ready. I'm in pretty good shape with the French. The Turks pushed a little closer with the Russians. Hey, see if things go south. Still not. I got the naval first, which is actually a nice thing. That's what you want if you're going to be attacking someone. But I'm not ready to attack Egypt yet. I could have started shipping forces down there with that in mind, thinking, hey, look, Russia's probably in fine shape. I'm going to give them a little bit of time, and more importantly, give the diplomacy a little bit more time. I'd rather just get Egypt than have to conquer it. Although, yeah, I can't absorb it because it's got troops. Don't ask me how Venice got absorbed or whatever. It's kind of fucked up. You can only have one unit stacking on the board anywhere. When leaders are killed or wounded or whatever, you get to pick a replacement leader. But what you don't get to do is just bring a leader onto the map when you need them. And that's kind of getting in the way here. I moved this Brunswick Corps over to Magdeburg. Got these guys in Berlin. I don't want them there. I'd like them to join. And maybe be a stronger defense or whatever, but I can't, because again, the stacking limitations. I can't just bring a leader on the board to command them. What I could do is take a leader out of one of these armies and throw it over there, and that would allow me to coordinate them. I don't think that's actually worth it. I think instead I'll slide down there. That's just a detachment moving on a Empire 1, and then I don't know, we're fine up here at Königsberg. It really doesn't make much difference. We're just hosed. I mean, we really are. We have no way of getting out of this either until the peace phase, when we can negotiate the peace that Austria and Russia want from us. I went out today, did a little shopping, got myself, the main expense was I bought myself some sushi, which used to be about $5-6. Now it's like 11, which kind of blows. It's the same. There's a sale day or whatever. I went to the Market of No Choice, which has like convenience store prices basically, but it's supposedly kind of a supermarket. I heard somebody call it the Market of Too Much Choice because like it has, I guess, too many things that are kind of prepackaged type stuff as opposed to like a real health food store. I don't know. I think there are people who are used to the little health food stores just getting stuff at those kind of things. It's sort of somewhere in between, It's like got bulk sections and stuff that work kind of like that. But on my way back, I ended up finding another Brunner book. I'm beginning to think that the two that I found were actually at that location, which is really near my house, which would be really sweet if like a lot of old science fiction is showing up there. I found something else which is more modern science fiction. Usually none shows up at that location. So there are sometimes books, but that's usually my deposit location. And then I also had to fix my dryer. The fucking the air outlet fell off. So that was, not a hard task, but moving the dryer out of the way and everything, getting in there. Tried to do it at first with like a hook or something. Anyway, that's one of the activation chits. I guess I'll do at least another one because it was a pretty minor one. I don't really want to push the Spaniards too hard. There's no reason to. Portugal's not going to surrender until winter. So, And England, I'm never going to be able to get England to surrender. So it's just kind of a question of, hey, can we come to a peace where I get to keep Portugal because I really want it, and I don't really want other stuff you have except Naples, which I'm not going to get, without French help. Kind of don't like, it feels like the automatic victory conditions are a little too restrictive. I mean, some of the countries maybe not so much, but some of them, it's just nasty what they have to do. That's fine. I don't mind it being hard. But what I mind, oh, there goes my one of the garbage trucks. There's 3 today. I don't mind it being really, really tough to get an automatic victory, but I don't feel like it should be as exclusive as it is. And if it is going to be that exclusive, I don't feel like it should be as different in terms of the amount of difficulty that each nation kind of faces. So, I mean, look, obviously some nations have a harder time getting them, so that should be factored in, but some of them just feel like that nation is going to have a hell of a hard time getting it. France's looks like it's almost automatic. Like they can get it very, very easily. They just have to keep people, they have to get all the areas here, Flanders, Holland. I'm going with this list as opposed to what maybe the map and other things support. I don't know which is right. Flanders, Holland, Hansa, Geneva, Neuchâtel. Now I don't have Neuchâtel yet. That's still Prussian. Oddly, very much like in my 1792 game, where Neuchâtel should not have been able to be conquered. Like the French shouldn't have been able to get a victory. But anyway, because Prussia left the war holding it and couldn't be attacked ever again. Piedmont, Genoa, Tuscany, and the Papacy. That sounds really easy. And Britain's been conquered. Okay, that's really hard. Or the continental system's been in effect for at least 2 winter victory phases, which, again, I feel like for that level, the continental system kind of has to be more than it's just automatically there, which would kind of blow, or like you basically are at war with Britain for 2 years, or one nation is aligned with it, or one conquered nation is aligned with it, although that's starting to get a little funkier because like you have to take it as a peace condition, and at the end of 2 years they probably get their mandatory peace wearing out. So it's just like a matter of, I got to go back to war with France in order to keep them from winning the game automatically, which actually fits to some extent the historical flow a little better. So like, look, Austria and Prussia, they'd have no reason with that Banania requirement, because if it is what I think it is, which may be all of Europe, not here, maybe to Salonika instead. I don't know. Maybe I should look it up. But, honestly, that means defeating pretty much everyone, including Turkey, if that's the case. Now, if it's only to here, that's different, but I'm pretty sure it's not. I think it's either Salonika or Smyrna or something along those lines, which really kind of just says, yeah, you have to have everybody in, so fuck it, you're not going to get it. So again, this, depending on how you want to interpret that rule, it could be trivial or pretty hard. Like, not impossibly, but pretty hard. Must never have been conquered, okay. And controlling Warsaw and Constantinople or Paris. Okay. Constantinople is going to be tough, but you could probably do it with Russia. So once I get Warsaw, I can turn my efforts to getting that warm water port on the Bosporus, which is actually a bigger deal. This is actually the kind of automatic conditions that I think are appropriate. So it's basically defeat Turkey or defeat France. Now, defeating France is harder because I would have to be the guy who's in charge at Paris, right? So like, Russia's a far way away. They don't have the biggest army in the game. Austria's it's hard to tell. But they're going to have a harder time keeping their troop strength up there. So that feels appropriate. I'm not so sure about the Constantinople one. That might be too easy, but okay. Certainly easier than the hard version of the French. Must control the following: Dresden, Munich, Venice, Mantua, Rome, and either Lyon or Paris. Hey, I could win in conjunction with Russia. If Russia holds Paris and I hold Lyon, we could both win. That's pretty cool. There's nothing about dealing with an automatic victory that two players reach at the same time. I'm okay saying they both win. I'm also okay going to the victory point thing and seeing which one wins a little better. Prussia, Warsaw, Dresden, Hanover, Hamburg, and Paris. Okay, this is again a tough one because we have to be the ones in Paris and we don't have a second option. Austria's got a straight anti-French proposal, but at least they have two cities that they could occupy to get it. And they don't even have to take Paris. So, but Prussia's is much, much more ugly. They don't have any options, and they're Spain, Lisbon, Gibraltar, and then this is kind of nice, Bordeaux, Naples, or Rome. All of those are possibilities. They really are. So that's kind of sweet. So yeah, I mean, taking Lisbon and Gibraltar makes perfect sense that those are requirements. Let's get all of the peninsula. But then a choice of like 3 different things that I could hold, that's a really nice flexible option. Now, the truth of the matter is, Bordeaux is probably the only one that I can reasonably reach unless I can get a lot of naval power into play. So conceivably, a pure war on Austria might work. And I know we're digging into things in such detail here, but the papacy is currently an Austrian ally. At this point in time, I could go to war with Austria. I think I'm not anymore. What did I say? Did we let Austria off the hook? I don't remember. It's this sheet. I'm actually not using that. No, we're still at war with Austria. So conceivably, if we can come to a peace with Britain, we could actually get the win if we manage to get Portugal and Gibraltar. Of course, Britain's not going to give them that peace if they're that close. But there you have it. So the Spanish one looks possible. I would say Spain is in a tough position in getting it. Britain can say no in this circumstance. But let's say the Grand Army had defeated Britain, then Britain would have surrendered to Spain, and Spain might have been able to just go do it, because there wouldn't be a navy facing them. Turkey has to create the Ottoman Empire. Probably not that hard. Nobody's really that invested in North Africa, and this is something where I thought Spain should actually be able to maybe replace Portugal with like Morocco and or Algeria and or Tunisia, just because they actually had goals that were not that long ago in North Africa. But you could also argue that they've kind of abandoned them, although the truth of the matter is they did occupy part of Morocco eventually. So, and have to control Kiev and either Odessa or Vienna. Well, Vienna's the hardest of them. That's the one I can't get, right? And we've talked about this before. But it's nice to have the option, so I don't mind that. Odessa is actually probably the easiest. Kiev is the middle range one. It's going to be pretty hard to actually take Ukraine from Russia. That's deep in there. That's going to require a couple of successful wars against Russia. I don't mind it, but it seems like Turkey has a pretty hefty job given their position in the game, their military capabilities and whatnot. They have to take from much, much more powerful country, Russia, and have to take a fair amount, as opposed to, you can see like Spain, which is, knocking things off that other people don't really require. Interestingly, Britain, yes, for their automatic victory, they need Lisbon and Gibraltar. So you're taking something from Britain that they need for automatic victory. But it's like, I don't know. It's a lot easier for Spain to take things on the peninsula from Britain than I think it will be for Turkey to take things from Russia. Of course, It's like my last time I played solo Empires in Arms that I remember. I may have done it once after this. And this is, Jesus, 30 years ago? It's hard to believe that if I haven't played it since then, but I think that's the case. Some 30 years ago, Turkey became a dominant power by basically beating up on Russia and Austria, for that matter. And it didn't do them much. You know, the dominant power status in that game, which is similar to the automatic victories in this, and is this wonderful goal. It's an optional role, but it's this wonderful goal that helps sort of drive you towards national interests as opposed to just glory and manpower. It doesn't really help your country if it doesn't have a powerful army to begin with. Now, Austria becoming a dominant power, that's scary, right? Russia becoming a dominant power, that's scary. France or Britain start as dominant powers. Either one of them losing it would really kind of suck a little bit and make them no longer as potent as they were. But yeah, I've seen Austria as a dominant power, and that was a really frightening game. Felt like it would be automatic victory for them. Turkey as a dominant power, they just don't have the troops in this game or in that one, and that's fair, I guess. I don't know. All right, let me pull another chit, I guess. I don't know. Done a lot of talking, but I also don't have much to do except go out and read. I'm falling further and further away from being, even like my functionality in life is decreased in ways that I didn't think it would. Oh yeah, I was just checking the year. It seems so far advanced. Yeah, but there's all that. A couple more chits. Got another winter quarters. But if the turn goes this long, the winter quarters kind of don't matter because, I guess if you're trying to delay making decisions or something and you are trying to play against the clock in the same way and you're trying to gamble, push your luck with the clock in terms of not doing stuff. But for the most part, I find the armies just do their things and the chits and I'm just drawing chits to end the turn because nobody really wants to push and do more, do something more while taking attrition. Really small units, sure, certainly one step is worth doing, but one step usually doesn't have a leader on it. Could. So I don't know. And we work our way down to the end. The third winter quarters comes up. No big deal. Anything conquered? Anything attrition? No. Anything conquered? Because you're okay on attrition. I don't know. Lisbon's a 2. Yeah, this has to make a check. I feel like only one strength point should have to make a check, though. I don't mind being on the 3 strength point table, but I don't want to lose more than one. I don't know what else would have to. Don't think anything else is at risk. And nothing has been conquered. In fact, it's impossible to conquer minors. It's only majors that could. But I got to make a decision with Prussia. Do they want to bail out? They're going to lose this war. They can maybe come to a peace agreement. That's good. I don't know. It means giving up Posen, right? No, Masovia. Giving up Masovia and Saxony if they do. But preserving my army. Means I can't win an automatic victory. I don't know what else it means. It's not good. It's not good. But I don't see how I can hold out. The only thing I can hope for is that France slams into Austria again. There's nothing preventing that. and that we kind of work together with Austria. But again, our peace conditions don't allow, or we kind of work together with France. Our peace conditions kind of don't really allow that. Well, our victory conditions. Let's look at them again. For Prussia, Warsaw, Dresden, Hanover, Hamburg. Hamburg is fine. Hanover I would have to take from France, but okay, that could happen. And Paris. I have to take Paris. There's no option to like have an to have a pro-French stance. And I guess that's what kind of upsets me, is that I don't feel like any nation should be forced into an anti-French position, no matter what. Like, I kind of like the Spanish model better, where it's like, do you want to go for France or do you want to go for other things? Yes, Spain has particularly easy conditions. I don't mind if they're harder than that. But yeah, I mean, Prussia can't stand up to Austria or Russia on its own, and certainly not to the pair of them. So chances are we will come to an agreement. I believe the negotiated peace would allow me to give up whatever the hell I like, right? I'll relook at that to make sure before I make a decision along those lines, just to ensure that what I'm thinking is correct. But there's a problem with the peace conditions as written from an actual peace. This way. Okay. The possible peace conditions: one province from the defeated major power's national territory. This cannot be a key city province as long as other eligible provinces are available. It must be adjacent to the victor's national territory or to the territory of a minor allied to the victorious major power. This is not a big deal for Austria. Austria wants Saxony, and they can take a province that was originally part of the territory of a minor allied to the victor. That's fine. A non-adjacent province that will be allied to a new, each provincial claim can be replaced by a province from a multi-province minor by an alliance with a single province minor country still allied to the defeated major power. So there would be 4 concessions available if Austria or Russia win this war. Britain gets the first call, believe it or not. It's not the person who's like done the most to defeat. It's it's your ordering. It's your reverse order in the diplomacy chart, I believe. Yeah. Which is sort of the more powerful nation gets its pick of choices, which feels wrong as well. But Russia can't take Masovia, because Masovia, and this is their goal, right? Masovia comes with Warsaw, which has a star, which means it's a key city. So is Königsberg. Posen is not, though, is it? Posen is not, which means, since I have West Galicia for Russia, I would have to take Posen as my first pick. I would have to take Danzig and West Prussia before I can take Masovia. This is really ugly. Like, Russia wants Masovia. That's all they fucking care about. So if Prussia wants to get out of this without being mauled, they have to cut a deal. On the other hand, they may not want to. They may prefer to hope for France to help them, because they kind of know Russia's not going to get what it wants. they agree to cut a deal and I read the rules on that. Even I ignore the rules, and they're going to hold out and see if they can get France to come in with them. They're going to cut the deal. I feel like it's basically a 50-50 because I need things from France, but I do need to get these things back from Austria and Russia. This may be my best fucking shot, but I got a 1. A 1 would have been the number, like if I went to something lower, I would go to, let's give them a 1 in 6 or whatever. So yeah, I'm gonna look up those surrender rules, see what happens. Free peace proposal is written up as a major power can always propose a peace, the opposing major power or bloc can freely accept or refuse, and the clauses are negotiated as the players see fit. You give me $10 real money and, you know, but whatever. Within the game, that sounds like I can give you anything. That feels a little strong, so I decided to look at the Entente rules, which are what you're allowed to do during normal diplomacy, not during the peace phase here. And that, an Entente does not require, it can include naval transport, it cannot include stacking together. Okay, so what we have, a player cannot transfer away a province owned by one of his controlled minor allies. That seems to indicate that you can transfer provinces, and then they say a transfer is performed then and there and cannot be revoked. This includes transfers of money, which is one way players can use money outside the economic phase. I assume it's any amount? I don't know. No, wait, such is still found on the amounts held. Boy, that's not, like, the fact that there's a negative, and that's the only thing. A player cannot transfer away a province owned by one of his controlled minor allies. It feels reasonable to me that I can transfer the allegiance of Saxony, which I could transfer as part of a surrender, and that I can transfer Masovia alone on this. And that's the piece that Austria and Russia won. So Prussia is going to give those things up. This is ugly for Prussia, but what choice did they have? You know, France is probably sitting there shouting and screaming, but officially they can't even actually speak at this point. So, you know, there we go. All right. So I'll write those down. Masovia is going to Russia. Saxony, we just transfer its alliance from Prussia to Austria. And it's a fair move. And then maybe Prussia is allowed to join the coalition, finally. In addition, Prussia is going to allow Russian units to remain where they are. If they come to... And here's, again, funny thing, right? You're allowed to negotiate at this point to come to a peace. We could talk about the alliance that we're not allowed to talk about next turn that we want to make. So Prussia is going to join the coalition. They can talk to Britain as well. They're at war with them as well. And this is going to end the war between Prussia, Britain, Austria, between Prussia and Austria, Russia, Britain. Transfer Masovia, but in addition, Russian units will be allowed to remain in Prussia pending, let's say for one turn, because we're kind of allowed to do whatever we want. And yeah, and Saxony is going to switch from a Prussian ally to an Austrian ally. And this allows those two big countries to get what they want off Prussia without weakening it significantly. And now Prussia can go to war with France. Now, because this is just a free peace, the same way as France's was, there's no mandatory peace in place. I think you could negotiate a mandatory peace as part of it, or something. Who knows? Because they're freely able to determine whatever the terms they want are. And the Entente is not, not powerful enough, although I think maybe you could do the same kind of stuff within the Entente. I did put the limitation on it. So if Saxony had a problem, like, let's say instead of Saxony it was Bavaria and somebody won it, whatever Bavaria owns, the Palatinate or whatever. No, they don't. Berg, they own Berg. Bavaria wouldn't be allowed to transfer Berg away under the Entente rules, and I would say they're probably not allowed to do it under this free peace either. I would put the same limitation on their national sovereign decision making. On the other hand, transferring allies, they're not really giving anything up, and I don't know. I just don't know. But yeah, you're allowed to do it during normal peace, so what the fuck. I'm not sure I would allow it during an Entente. This is also very different. Like, if you consider Empires in Arms, you declare what kind of surrender you're making, essentially. You can make a conditional or unconditional surrender, and the conditional surrender comes with less bonuses. The unconditional gives you more benefits than the conditional. Probably closer to the 4 points in this. The total you fought on and have to give 8 points, that's pretty nasty. I think there's something like that, Complete Conquest, which doesn't actually conquer you anything. It includes an unconditional surrender, but I think it includes perhaps more in Empires in Arms. I don't recall. But it is a way you can force somebody into an unconditional surrender when they wouldn't normally do it. In EU, you don't have a choice. The current conditions between the two nations, or coalitions, I guess. I don't really recall too much about it. But between the two nations, if one nation's surrendering to another, that condition is what determines the extent of the peace, and you're not allowed to give up stuff or trade stuff away like you can freely with the Entente or the free peace proposal here. This is very, very liberal. EIA doesn't allow those kind of transfers either, although it does allow a free transfer of as much money as you like. It doesn't have a limitation on that. I mean, money's just money, right? It's a much bigger thing to say, hey, you can have Masovia, as opposed to whatever the limitation on the amount of money you can give, which is really limited. I don't remember what the amount is, but for everyone but Britain, it's a pittance. Now in EU, you can only take the peace that you have won during the battles. Now that brings into mind things like the Peace of Westphalia, or some of the other pieces that came up, where essentially the government couldn't accept a peace under certain conditions. It wasn't a matter that oh, we don't really want to give that up. They wanted peace desperately, but they could not, without destroying their national honor, accept a peace of this nature. So for example, Prussia just fought a war. They didn't lose anything. They haven't lost a battle. They lost a couple of provinces. That would give them a couple of minuses on there. Probably not enough to take everything that they lost. I don't think they could have given away what they just did on this under the EU circumstance. The one special case in EU is you can always come to a white peace where it just returns to status quo ante or whatever. Anyway, we've spent a lot of time on this video because we're plotting through all the weirdness that's going on with the diplomacy and stuff like that. I'm really not thrilled with how the game handles all of that. I don't feel like it's doing anything well at all. The only place where this game is doing anything at least partially well, i.e. better than War and Peace, is the hex movement of the units, but I think overall it still kind of fails comparatively. I think it's just a lemon, man, across the board. But it may be possible to fix in a way that War and Peace isn't possible to fix what its problems are. Obviously, it's not, because the designer keeps, revising it and everything, and it just never solves the main problems. Can't get them out of the way. I think this one maybe could, but the rules as written don't hint at it doing so. All right, we'll send this one off.